Welcome to the AccuShield podcast. Deontay Davis, VP of Sales here. And today I'm joined by Bob Kallonen, President Emeritus of Amica. Bob, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Glad to have you here. So you're here today at the AccuShield Healthcare Staffing Innovation Workshop. Love to hear a little bit more about why you decided to come and what you're looking to get out of it.
Yeah, I think what's kind of cool about this is I'm retired now, and so when Charles and Curtis asked me to consider it, I went I need this like a hole in the head. But one of the most existential threats to the senior living industry, which is fundamentally a people business, is how to continue to deliver and recruit, retain, nurture, challenge, lead, really high quality people to deliver high quality service. It's become increasingly difficult. It's something we used to be able to take for granted, and now we have to be more sophisticated and intentional and deliberate about it. And anything that would improve that kind of rising tide to lift all boats for everyone is something I'm interested in. When we chatted about it, I said, look, let's try and do something that's not like a typical conference. And they were completely on board. Let's do something where the success of the conference will largely depend upon the engagement of the participants, who everyone is an expert in their own right in terms of trying to figure out what they've been doing. And if we could only tap into what each of us have been doing, the power in a room of more than 100 people doing that would be pretty special. And so far as we've been going through it, like touch wood, it feels like we're beginning to tap into that kind of energy.
Yeah, it's going great so far, I would say. And that was one thing we wanted to do very differently. We didn't want this to be everyone comes to a conference, you just listen to the speakers, you hear things. We wanted this to be very interactive, right? To roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty, and really understand, why staffing is the biggest issue in senior living and some solutions that we can come up with to go put together in action once we leave home from here. So yeah, super excited to have you. You are a veteran and a living legend in the senior living space. So would love to hear about your experience and what your background's been, because you've been, worked with Sunrise, you're at Amica, Schlegel Villages. So talk to me a bit about how you got into senior living and what your tenure looked like.
That's a good question. It's a really circuitous route. It's not something I ever thought when I was thinking about what I would do for a career when I was finishing high school that I'd ever work in. I mean, I trained as an urban and regional planner. And I worked in the construction and land development industry for the first 10 years of my career. Loved it. And there was a recession in the late 80s, early 90s that caused the business to go, for us to have to kind of shut down the business, the partnership we were in. And I remember at the time thinking, what else could I do? And I'm naturally incredibly introverted. So one of the things I committed to do was to do a job that would force me out of my comfort zone. And I actually went into a role much like what you have now, whereas I went into a sales role where I had to go on horrors, meet strangers and talk to them. And coming out of that, I was asked to come and work in a senior living business, but in my construction capacity. They had some construction work to do. And it was when I began rubbing shoulders with people in their operational side, their executive directors, their department heads, many of their frontline team members, I really began to enjoy the relationships I was building there. But still, my heart and soul was working in construction. One day, their operating president comes to me and says, "We'd love for you to work in senior living." And I said, no, people are the problem, and you've only got people. And I'm a construction guy. I won't be able to relate to people. And for the first time, he opened my eyes when he said, "That's not the sense I'm getting when I talk to the leaders we have." This is not me asking you. These are the administrators that we have who've been in the business for 15, 25, 30 years, saying they'd love to work with someone like you. And so as I opened my eyes to it, I began to work with this small but growing company. It was 18 properties when I joined. Within 2.5 years with acquisition, we were at 43. And then there's a point in time where there was a bunch of consolidation in the industry. We were acquired by someone else. I learned the value of how how impactful culture could be, positively and negatively. The organization that I worked with wasn't negative, but it wasn't me. Yeah. And so I wanted always to work in an environment where I could be fully myself and try to be as useful for others as I could be. And went and spent some time with Extendicare up in Canada. And all of this work was on the funded long-term care side. There was part of me that wanted to know, what's it like when you work with an organization where people are paying for the service out of their pockets, and if they love what you're doing, they can reward you, and you can ask for more. And if they don't like what they're doing, they punish you, and they may actually leave. So I left Extendicare to join Sunrise, and it was at a point where Sunrise was exploding in growth because they just recently acquired Marriott Senior Living, and it was just a tremendous time to join that organization. I started by just working with the Canadian operations, and over the course of my time there, ended up running a third of their business in North America.
As the VP of operations there?
Yeah, it was really interesting to me because it opened my eyes to the fact that the needs of seniors and their families in Canada wasn't unique. It was very similar in the United States, and I saw it was very similar in what Sunrise was doing in Germany and in the UK as well. So followed that up, went back home, worked for, again, a growing family-owned business called Schlegel Villages, who are really innovative, and then have spent the last 7 years of my career with Amica Senior Lifestyles in Canada.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I actually didn't know Sunrise had operations in Germany and the UK.
They don't anymore. It was for a brief period of time.
Fascinating. So did you do anything with the communities over there at all, or were you involved?
No, I had members of my team who went over to help them out. But as I was growing, my responsibility was more like, stay here and help these teams in North America figure it out.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're retired now. Well, and we'll actually get to the most important piece of this podcast, which is you have a maple farm.
Yeah, I have a maple syrup farm.
Tell me about the maple syrup farm.
So first, we've lived in the property we live on now for 15 years. When we purchased it, there was nothing there in the bush, and I just had this like almost childlike interest in going, hey, I wonder if I could do that. And literally the first year, it was old school, hung buckets on 25 trees, I think, and poured the pails and poured freezing cold sap down my shirt sleeves in -5 weather, and boiled sap on like an open oven fire we made, and it was an awful lot of work to create, I think, like 12 mason jars of maple syrup. But got hooked by it and went, I'm not doing it that way again. And then we expanded to put taps on trees, gravity fed, 200 taps, a little hobby evaporator. And today we run about 3,000 taps. We produce about 2,200 to 3,000 liters of maple syrup a year, and most of it we just sell from like kind of our farm gate front, and customers have got to know us, but it's one of those things where it gets you outdoors at a time of year in Ontario where it's the end of winter. You're not really enthralled with winter, and you just stay indoors and hibernate normally. Yeah. And it gets you outdoors at a time a lot when you wouldn't normally, and you get to see things like the very first flower that pops up through snow, and you go, I didn't know that. Or the very first warm day, a mosquito lands on your arm, and you go, where'd you come from? Yeah. And none of these experiences, and besides that, like there's some kind of magic to, you kidding me? I'm boiling this stuff over and over and over again, and all of a sudden it turns into that amazing stuff. Yeah. There's a science and a history and an art to it that's kind of cool.
Love it. So when I come to Canada, I'm going to make sure I got to stop by your farm, get me some good maple syrup.
Yeah, what you should do is instead of just like me giving it to you, you should like wear warm clothing and come on the day when the sap's flowing, and you can make your own.
You can work it. We can do that too. Yeah. Even better. Love it. So most people know AccuShield as the touchscreen kiosk company. Been around since about 2013 for safety and security, knowing who's in the building and all that. And we, as of late, partnered with BookJane, which was a scheduling call-out solution based in Canada, to really help address the staffing challenges in senior living, which has been, one of the biggest issues over the last few years. And, with making sure shifts are filled, making sure residents are taken care of, and everything like that, you guys were actually one of the first to partner with BookJane, right? So talk to me a bit about what that experience was like and what that partnership looked like from the beginning.
Sure. At the time, BookJane was seeking to already established a digital agency. Their goal, I think, was to kind of Uberize home care. And they had a somewhat successful business. We're trying to grow it, thought that the way to grow it faster was to talk to senior living operators and just plug into their business needs. And when Curtis came to talk to me, I listened to how he was doing it, and I said to him at the end, like, I've got good news and bad news for you. The bad news is I know you're trying to sell me an agency solution. I view the use of agency as proxy for failure. At the end of the day, if you can imagine a team member who's a full-time team member with us, and we invest a lot of time and energy into recruiting the right team member and making sure that they're culturally aligned, I begin to dilute that cultural quotient, if you like, every time I use an agency team member. But I'm also aware that I dilute it every time I use one of my team members who's casual and only works with us for a shift every 10 days. What I'd love to do is use your software to try to figure out how could I take more of my team members that I would love to have work more with us and give them more shifts than right now we're able to do by trying to juggle it and manage it. We have multiple locations in close proximity. We should be able to share team members, but it proved to be difficult to do because when one team who thinks they're doing a really good job of recruiting people, that's maybe even a superior job to another Amica team, would become actually an impediment to the easy movement of people. So I asked him if he would white label the software, and it was kind of funny because I think when he met me, it was the day before my family was going on a pretty extended Scandinavian vacation, and he was sure I was blowing him off. And when I got back into my office, I probably gave him 2 weeks, and he never called. And I called him and said, I thought you were going to call me. And he was shocked because he thought it was over and dead. And we began this partnership where we actually selected 4 of our general managers to sit on a team that helped develop the product white labeled for us uniquely. And it has evolved to the place where it's almost inconceivable to think about trying to figure out how you fill shifts and how you schedule and staff without some kind of tool. I think the people side of the business is something that for years there were always more people than there were positions, and we didn't really have to be sophisticated about how we approached it. Those days are long gone, and they're not coming back, and in fact it's likely to become more difficult. And so I think we have to take the tools that could allow us to be better managers of critical resources and be able to become expert in how we find out what's in it for our team members and how can we give them more of what they want, where it aligns with what we need as an organization.
That's great. So let's actually touch on that. So whenever you were at Amica, I guess even just throughout your whole career, what were some of the more people-focused initiatives that you guys rolled out that worked really well?
I think one of the things we were talking about this morning, the notion of looking at individuals and saying, could you imagine yourself working with this organization for a long period of time and growing and developing your career? And I think before Amica, going back to even before Sunrise days, that opportunity as a leader to invest in someone else and make a difference in the trajectory of their career was something that I always kind of took as the highest honor in the role. When I first moved into senior living, I can remember having this moment. I'd never been a GM. I'd volunteered in homes. I had no right to really be in the role I was in, and I found myself responsible for 15 homes with 5,000 team members. And I had that moment where I went, oh yeah, great, I got the job. Oh crap, I got the job. Now what do I do? Yeah. And one of the things that calmed me down and stopped me from hyperventilating into a brown paper bag was I remember thinking, look, I don't have to be overwhelmed by the thought of 5,000 direct and indirect team members. I have 15 administrators who, if at the end of 12 months of working together with them, somehow they're better at what they do as a result of their relationship with me, even if it's in a small way, then I've done my job. And I remember going to, my boss and saying, here's the way I'm going to test whether or not I'm making a difference. And Rick was his name, and I said, Rick, I get that even if the financial results aren't there after 12 months, I can almost guarantee you that after 24 months, it will be there if, in fact, what I'm witnessing is real and I'm not making it up. And that truism has held true throughout. And so I think whether it's back in a day where we didn't use that much technology or today where we're using more and more technology, the blending of what is essentially a social technology with an information technology is, I think, where the real power lies. It's recognizing that it only matters if at the end of the day, it makes a difference to and it matters to the individuals that you're trying to serve and support. And I think part and parcel of that is recognizing that if you have a group of leaders who are first and foremost seeing their responsibility as being essentially stewards and trustees of the people that they're supporting. It's not a hierarchy where they're reporting up to you and they're working to help you achieve your goals. Although that's how we measure it. That is, in fact, what's happening. What it really is are you helping them to achieve their goals? And if you do, you get that beautiful kind of 1 + 1 = 3, where you end up getting more out of people than really what you're contractually have a right to expect. And we used to talk to all our leaders about, everyone probably in the best systems we could build are going to be giving us 50% of what they're capable of. You really can't contract for any more than that. The second 50%, they're going to choose to volunteer or not volunteer. And in not volunteering it, they're not doing their job. They're doing what they contracted to do. But man, when you create an environment where everyone wants to give of that second 50%, something magical happens, and you end up getting results that other people find hard to replicate. I think those kind of people-focused themes and priorities, if they're always in the back of your brain, whatever you're thrown in terms of difficulties and complexities, you're able to kind of come through it. And if I could just share one of the analogies that one of my team members gave me was, they said, when you do that, it's kind of like it's a strengthening of the relationship. And she went on to say, it's impossible to not have relationships with people. I mean, you and I have just met. Yeah. We have a relationship. The relationship is tenuous. It's not strong. Mm-hmm. I could easily snap it. There's something I could say right now and you'd go, what a jerk, right? But if you and I had worked together for 5 years and you'd seen me and I was genuinely, authentically someone who was in your corner and was acting first in your interests, if I did and said the same thing, you might look at me and almost half humorously go, are you off your meds? Yeah. Like, you'd know that's not who you are, Bob. And this woman who I worked with said, our relationships at the beginning, they're as fragile as the silk web in a spider's web. The goal is to work on it so that all of a sudden they're more like fishing line. And then they're more like that kind of aircraft cable that you see in modern railings. But could you keep working at it so that in your life you had a number of people, and even in your business contexts, who your relationship bonds are like the cables that hold up the Golden Gate Bridge? Mm-hmm. And if you had that, what is there that would enter you or hit you from a business perspective that could ever snap that? Nothing. And that, I think, is what leaders need to have as a goal in terms of building that, modeling it with their own direct relationships, and then insisting on that with the relationships between their direct reports and the people they're supporting. And if an organization could ever strengthen that web, it's kind of breathtaking to think about what they could accomplish.
Yeah, I mean that's so pivotal to building the right type of culture and to getting the right leaders in the right seats, so that way they really make the organization run effectively how it should, and then ultimately the residents are taken care of, right? Because your staff are being taken care of. Yeah. So that's pretty awesome. Who has impacted your life when it comes to leadership and someone that's mentored you? And, with everything that you just mentioned here now, right, like it takes time to develop that, to learn and understand these things. So who's someone that comes to mind that helped walk you through that process to get you to where you are today?
Yeah. there's a lot, there's obviously, if you think about it, all of us have many people that we could point to, but in one, if I was gonna pick one, I mentioned a guy who was the first guy that looked at me and said, hey, you should go into this role. It's a guy named Rick Willis, who was the president of a company called VersaCare at the time. Mm-hmm. And Rick and I have maintained contact. He lives about 20 minutes away from where I live, and probably twice a year still we grab a coffee, and inevitably the conversation I have with him starts with, what the crap were you thinking when you put me into that role? Like, you had no right. Yeah. And he says, it kind of turned out okay. But I think part of what I learned from Rick was that be a person as a leader who sees your people as whole persons. Mm-hmm. And Rick said to me one time, he said, you can spend a lot of money going to a lot of conferences, but I remember him saying to me, purpose in your heart to learn by being a reader. Take part of the money that you would have spent for education on going to conferences, negotiate it in every job you have, that where you just, as you see something, buy it, read it, think about it, keep it in your library. Mm-hmm. And so there's been many, many people who I've never met who have drawn upon their wisdom by reading what and thinking critically about it, and kind of understanding, I'm not sure I buy all of that, but that's a nugget that's worth hanging on to, and it's proving the test of time. So I think it's that. And then I think just constantly being open to people who have been leaders of different personality, who I've learned things from, and sometimes looking at them and going, I could never do it the way you do it. In fact, I'd hate my job if I had to do it the way you do it. Yeah. But I'm learning so much from you. And sometimes it's, how do I take that and authentically recreate it in the way that I do it, so that I don't come off as something that's trying to be a parody of you. Yeah.
Solid. So, you think about how senior living has changed throughout the years, right? Where do you see things going over the next 5 to 10 years, especially as millennials, Gen Z, all these different new generations really start to step into the workforce and hopefully step into senior living?
Yeah. I think the thing that senior living, we're already seeing this happen. Probably 15 years ago, I began talking to my teams about, the demographics are changing, and you're going to find increasing difficulty in accessing the talent that you need. Mm-hmm. And part of the solution to getting the talent that you need is you're going to have to make the roles more sophisticated, more attractive, more challenging, and you're going to have to pay more. And I can envision a future where you're going to be doing the same given amount of work with 30% fewer people being paid 30% more. Mm-hmm. And the solution is not going to be them just running faster on the treadmill. The solution has to be us intelligently identifying what things are we currently doing that don't add value. It's interesting. Just yesterday, I was listening to a number of business academics who, including Gary Hamel was one of them, who I'd guess he's in his mid-70s now, and he was looking back on a life of research and saying, why have all the organizations that I studied in my prime and I used to hold up, and they could be held up as the icons of progressive development, GE, IBM, Procter & Gamble, he called them, why are they sclerotic now? Why are they going sideways? And part of the discussion they had was, it's possible that if the leadership of people and the gift of being able to know how to do that is a capital of sorts, it's a dynamic capital. What works today isn't going to work tomorrow. Yeah. We could take stuff that Frederick Taylor did in the 30s around measurement of work, and you try to apply it today, and we'd all laugh at it. It's not going to work. It's just the stuff that worked 20 years ago isn't going to work. And I think these academics made an interesting comment that got me thinking. They said, business schools are probably going to have to change from thinking as their mandate being training the hundreds or thousands of elite leaders that will then lead everyone else to how do they train millions? Yeah. How do you get everyone who works in a team in senior living to be a leader in their own right? And is there a lot of work that we currently have to do today to coordinate, to give direction to? Is there a lot of that work that could just disappear if everyone would just pick up the mantle of leadership. I think the one big break will be, if we're honest with ourselves, we still have two classes of people in senior living: those that do the thinking and decision making, and those that do the listening and the executing. Yeah. And there's something that's in that there is where other industries who have faced challenges earlier, the automotive industry around the quality challenge, radically reinvented themselves so that they could thrive and survive. And you've got, the North American automakers producing much more today than they produced in the 80s, with many fewer people. We're going to have to figure out how to do that in senior living.
Yeah. I think that just makes for such an awesome opportunity to disrupt the space and really create some new innovations and really advance the ball down for the whole industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So last question I'll ask for you. What piece of advice would you give to your earlier self as you were first stepping into senior living?
Yeah, I think I would have told myself earlier that as important as the role of technology and knowledge was when I started, I underestimated the power of relational leadership with people. And I think it's the combination of those two things. I would have started earlier experimenting with what types of things and what types of approaches am I taking with people are working and which aren't, and get good at that. Because while we're going to see all kinds of advances, and there's lots of fear-mongering about with this advancing technology, your job is going to be eliminated. I think what we're starting to see is people who master what I called social technology earlier, who can help to do what humans can uniquely do, the coordinating, the inspiring, the challenging with logic. Those individuals today are more highly paid than they were in the past, those kind of generalist operational leaders. And they're going to be even more valued in the future because they're going to be the glue that kind of keeps it all together. And they're going to be the oil that helps reduce the friction when inevitably pieces are rubbing up against each other in unexpected ways. But I think I would have started, younger, and it's a challenge to anyone starting out today because there's such a drive almost to specialize early on, and almost resisting that urge and getting as much broad knowledge as you can that moves people, moves their heads, moves their hearts, moves their souls. The people that can do that will be the people I think who will thrive into the future.
That's good stuff. So last 20-second answer.
Second to last one.
20-second answer. Why would you tell someone to come to next year's Healthcare Staffing Innovation Workshop?
Yeah, I think the easy piece is you'll likely pick up ideas that you hadn't picked up before. And some of them, by the way, might be, if I lived to be 1,000, I would never do that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's legit. And the other is you will be able to build relationships that I think could be meaningful and helpful with people that you'd never met before.
Yeah, love it. Bob, this has been a pleasure. We're excited for the rest of the workshop and to hear everything else that's going to go on. So
great.
We appreciate the time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure.